Welcome to the Bell Curve. In 2005, on the aging circuitry of the PlayStation 2, a sparse, peculiar adventure arrived with almost no interest in entertaining you in the conventional sense. No bustling towns, no chatty merchants, no parade of minor villains, just a boy, a horse, and a bargain with something ancient and untrustworthy. You begin as Wanda, carrying a lifeless body into a forbidden shrine. A disembodied voice, never a comforting sign, offers a transaction. Slay 16 colossi, and she may live again. The premise is disarmingly simple. Kill the giants, save the girl, roll the credits. But simplicity in the hands of Fumito Ueda is less a design limitation and more a philosophical provocation. Ueda often spoke about focusing on character expression, particularly companions. In Ico, it was the fragile girl whose hand you held. In The Last Guardian, it was the towering beast you befriended. Between those works sits Shadow of the Colossus, where companionship becomes complicated. You are devoted to Mono, you rely on your horse aggro, and in a perverse twist, you develop a strange intimacy with the very creatures you are required to kill. The Forbidden Lands are vast and austere, almost offensively empty. No side quests, no bustling encampments, not even a stray goblin to liven up the afternoon. After the tight enclosed architecture of Ico, Ueda wanted openness, grasslands stretching to the horizon, canyons that swallow sound, ancient ruins that feel older than language. Riding aggro across those plains becomes an act of meditation. The camera drifts, pulls back, glides low. You are given space, not objectives. Your only navigational tool is your sword. Raise it to the sky and sunlight fractures into a beam, pointing towards your next target. It is part dowsing rod, part divine spotlight. You follow it across bridges, through forests where light drips between leaves, into deserts that feel like abandoned thoughts. The journey is rarely interrupted. Downtime is the point. Years before so-called walking simulators became fashionable, Shadow of the Colossus understood that silence can be more expressive than exposition. Then, inevitably, you see it. Each of the 16 colossi is a study in scale and personality. Some resemble humanoid giants, others serpentine hydras, airborne leviathans, or creatures that seem assembled from stone and regret. The first encounter is always awe, that vertiginous moment when the camera tilts up and you realise you are ant-sized. Then, curiosity takes over. How does it move? Where does it react? What is architecture and what is anatomy? The fights are not about reflexes alone, they are puzzles, environmental riddles played out on the backs of living mountains. You goad a colossus into striking the ground so you can climb its limb. You wait for it to lower its head, you leap, grasping a tuft of fur or stone outcrop embedded in its hide. And then the music swells, an evocative, mournful score that refuses to sound triumphant. This is not fanfare, it is lamentation dressed as adrenaline. Mechanically, everything revolves around your grit meter. Hold on too long and your stamina drains. The creature bucks, shakes, scrapes you against stone. You cling to the R2 trigger while searching for a glowing sigil, the weak point. Reach it, drive your sword down, and black tendrils erupt from the wound like ink in water. It is dreadful. Because the colossi do not cackle, they do not taunt. Many ignore you entirely until provoked. They are not terrorizing villages, they are existing. When they fall, slowly, tragically, the music shifts to a mournful motif. No experience points, no gold, just silence, broken by the thud of something ancient collapsing into dust. Ueda once remarked that resurrecting the dead is, by its nature, immoral. It would be discordant to celebrate each kill with triumphant brass, so instead the game leaves you in an emotional vacuum. You are meant to sit with what you have done. The design is restraint taken to its logical, merciless conclusion. Strip away distractions, leave only intent and consequence. And here's where the blade twists. At the outset, it is easy, comfortably easy, to assume Wanda as a noble romantic hero. He loves, he sacrifices, he endures. We are conditioned, after decades of gaming, to trust that our objectives are morally sanctioned. If the quest marker says kill, then kill we shall, with righteous enthusiasm. Shadow of the Colossus undermines that reflex. As the bodies accumulate, Wanda's own form begins to change. His complexion pales, his eyes darken. He stumbles more heavily. Something is eroding. The booming voice that guides you begins to feel less like benevolent deity and more like opportunistic manipulator. By the time the narrative reveals its full hand, the heroic framing collapses. You are not saving the world, you are unravelling it. Playing it in 2005, that ambiguity felt radical. In an era where most big-budget titles wore their morality in primary colours, here was a game suggesting that the player might be complicit in tragedy. By 2018, when the remake arrived on the PlayStation 4, audiences were perhaps more attuned to moral grey zones, yet the impact endured. For the remake, Bluepoint rebuilt the game from the ground up with extraordinary fidelity. The art was redone, lighting transformed forest into cathedrals of shade and glare. Textures on Wanda's cloak ripple with believable weight. You can see to the horizon without the draw distance fog clipping your ambition. All of the technical improvements mattered because so much of the experience is contemplative. When half of your time is spent riding across empty plains, visual clarity is not a luxury, it is the canvas. The remaster also addresses former irritations. The original's frame rate could buckle under the sheer presence of a massive Colossus. Controls were idiosyncratic, jump map to triangle, grip to R1. The remake sensibly modernises these choices, while allowing purists to revert if they enjoy a bit of historical discomfort. There are still flaws. The camera can lose itself in a tangle of fur at precisely the wrong moment. Some encounters hinge on coaxing a creature into standing in an exact position, which can feel like persuading a stubborn animal into a bath. But these are irritations, not indictments. What remains untouched is the mood. A feeling of isolation, of dark clouds gathering in a sky that rarely brightens, of solitude so complete it begins to feel metaphysical. It is remarkable that a game with so little overt narrative can evoke such sustained foreboding. That emotional through line, more than any mechanical innovation, is why it persists. There is a peculiar bravery in making a game about repetition and regret. Each cycle is similar: locate, observe, climb, strike, mourn. Yet the emotional weight compounds. By the final confrontation, the pattern has become ritualistic. You are not grinding for loot, you are descending. And perhaps that is why Shadow of the Colossus endures. Not because it was technically audacious, though it was. Not because it was visually striking, though it remains so. It endures because it trusted players to sit with discomfort. To recognise that desire, even love, can justify terrible acts. To acknowledge that being the protagonist does not guarantee righteousness. Few games dare to remove applause from victory. Fewer still replace it with silence. Nearly 2 decades on, whether experienced on a humming PlayStation 2 or a sleek PlayStation 4, Shadow of the Colossus feels less like a relic and more like a parable. It reminds us that interactivity is not merely about power fantasies. It can be about responsibility, about complicity, about the cost of insisting that the ends justify the means. And in a medium still enamoured with escalation and spectacle, There is something quietly defiant about a story that says, "Here is your quest, here is your sword, now live with it."